Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm reviewing The Ruin of Kings by Jenn Lyons. So The Ruin of Kings is a new adult epic fantasy novel. We follow Kieran as he discovers that he is not actually an orphan, but he is the lost heir of a royal bloodline, as he discovers that sometimes being the fairy tale prince is not exactly what it seems. Now this is the first book in a 5-book series. I believe it has also just been picked up for TV and is full of dragons, princes, gods, magic, wizards, and all of the great things that I love in fantasy. So this video will have a non-spoiler section and a spoilery section, so if you haven't read the book you don't have to be spoiled by it, but you can come back later and listen to all of my thoughts on it. So this is a book that showed up at my work last week and I wasn't really on my radar. I wasn't really thinking too much about it. I think I had read the blurb once and I was like, yeah, not really my vibe, but my boss gave me a proof copy, so I thought, I may as well, I'm not reading anything else at the moment. And by like page 2 I was hooked. So as I said, this is an epic fantasy and it is fucking epic. There is so many characters and places and things and just crazy stuff to get your brain around that it is also quite difficult. Now there is like a 12-page glossary at the back of this book that contains all of your character names, all of like the different kinds of languages that's used. There's also a pronunciation guide, which I didn't really use, explanation on the royal houses, and my favorite, a family tree. Now Ruin of Kings is told in 3 different timelines, so the overall book is told by this one character. Then we also have Kieran's point of view and Talon's point of view. Talon is Kieran's jailer. So Kieran and Talon are telling Kieran's story, but then this other character, who I won't mention the name of yet, is telling the overall story, if that makes sense. And from the reviews that I've seen, that's what people are struggling a lot with, is the different timelines. So I think this could have been told better as like a coherent, flowing, linear narrative. Maybe, but I still really enjoyed the flipping back and forth. I absolutely loved the world, I loved the world building, I loved the characters, I loved the magic system. It was very difficult to wrap my head around to begin with. Now a lot of the characters have similar names due to like the naming conventions they have in this book. So lots of characters have similar sounding names, similar names. There is also like prophecies, there is also rebirths, there is also soul switching. So it was very difficult to kind of keep my head around who was who, where was where, who was related to what and doing what where. And it was a bit of a mindfuck. I read this book in about 3 days because I didn't want it to end, and also because it was difficult. That said, it's being kind of called like the new Name of the Wind, like it's up there with like Sanderson and Robin Hobb and George R.R. Martin, and I disagree. Like it's a very good book for book 1, but it's still not, like I don't think it's at that level yet. It is very convoluted. It is very, we have a main character who's like trying to be Kvothe, but is like a weirder version of Kvothe. I think Kieran, who's our main character, is me in a fantasy setting. Like when he gets thrown into situations, he's like, what the fuck is going on? He's very witty, full of smart assery, and he's really smart. But he's also one of those characters who does really dumb things because he's like, I can do anything. Another cool thing about this book is the kind of representation and diversity throughout this book. In terms of most of our main characters are characters of color, and this is one of the fantasy worlds where it doesn't matter, you know, there's no real focus on if you're a man having sex with or married to a man, or a woman having sex with or married to a woman. Nobody really cares. It is addressed a few times. Our main character, I believe he's bisexual, but he's on the scheme of more girls, I guess. It's hard to explain. He spends a lot of time in the book, you know, having relations with women and appreciating women and having sex with women, but he also spends the entire book going on about how attractive his friend is, and being propositioned by his friend, and thinking about having sex with his friend. He also mentions that he has dabbled in men, but has decided that he prefers girls. But I think throughout this series, like there's no romance in this book, which is probably another reason that I really liked it, but I think, like if I had to pick a ship, I guess, I would pick Tyrion and Terafe, but again, it is a whole other thing. There are also a lot of adult themes in this book. None of them are overly graphic, but there is the mention of, you know, rape, slavery, incest, abuse, all of those sorts of things as well. So if you're going into this book, just be aware of that if you're a younger reader. That was my non-spoilery section of The Ruin of Kings. Now I'm going to get into a spoiler section, so if you haven't read the book and don't want to be spoiled, bugger off and then come back when you're ready. Otherwise, let's just get into it. I'm going to tie my hair back for this one because it was intense. Now, like I said, it was a very heavy epic fantasy, as in a lot of the characters have very similar names. The one thing that I struggled with a lot is the soul switching. There is this necklace that has been like passed down 3 generations. If I'm wearing the necklace and I'm killed, my soul then goes into their body. So my body dies, but my soul and my essence is in their body, if that makes sense. So essentially it's like a body swap, which gets very confusing down the track when someone has swapped bodies like 4 or 5 times and you're like, oh, so you're actually this long dead queen in the body of a slave who was the mother of Kieran, who was the lost son of this bloodline, and it's very convoluted in the way that like there's lots, I don't know if it's not like incest, but there is incest in the book. It's hard to keep track. Like I was flipping through that glossary into that family tree most of the time throughout the book, which usually annoys me, but I was so interested in the book that I didn't really care. I like Kieran as a protagonist. I think, I mean, you could either love him or hate him. He's one of those characters. I like the way he handles things. I think he's very funny and very witty and snarky, which is what I love about characters. I also love Teraith. I think that's how you pronounce his name. I think he's great. I think and I hope that he's going to be some sort of potential love interest in the future, but I also want to know more about his story. And then there is the overarching premise of like prophecy and not time travel, but like rebirth and being reborn. Like Kieran was apparently born, you know, not millions of years ago. Kieran has apparently lived before, but then his soul was split or killed or something. And it's like, it's really hard to explain unless I was to go through the entire book and explain it to you. There are dragons and there are demons and there are witches and there are wizards, and I really enjoy the magic system. As I said, I really like the world. I really like the races of characters. Like you've got your humans and then you've got your Vaan. I call them Vaan. I think it's pronounced Vaan. It could be Vane. I imagine them looking like elves, like the elves from Lord of the Rings. There are your Kiripus elves, who I believe are like white, blonde, that sort of more Legolas looking elf. Then there's your Manol Vane, who I believe are like quite dark in coloring, you know, like dark hair, dark skin, black eyes, all that sort of stuff. And just kind of how all like the same race but two different kinds of the race and the differences between them. Vane and humans kind of interact, and how like wizards and witches interact, demons and the dragons and the Black Brotherhood, which are assassins. This whole species that are part snake. It's real weird. It's a really weird book, and I didn't think I was gonna like it as much as I did. That being said, the second book I believe comes out towards the end of the year, and I'm gonna have to reread this book before I read the second book, because there is so much happens. Like so much happens. I can't just be like, oh, he's on a quest. There are so many different points of this book that I need to go back and figure out, but overall I really enjoyed it. I really struggled to put it down when I needed to like go to sleep or anything. I couldn't put it down, but I also didn't want it to end. But it also took me 3 days to read because it was so thick, and I was just trying to let everything sink in. But I absolutely adored it. I thought it was fantastic. And obviously there are a lot more adult themes in this as well. Like I said earlier, like the incest and the mention of rape. I don't believe, going off the top of my head, that it's not graphic. There's violence, so the violence is the main thing. Like there's a lot of beating and sword play and normal gory stuff you expect in fantasy. And you know, like the mention of like slavery and whores, who are essentially sex slaves and all that sort of stuff. If you're not a fan of all those graphic themes, they aren't overly explicit, but they are obviously still in the book. Anyway, that was my review on The Ruin of Kings. I really enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to the next book in the series. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, and if you've read the book and what you thought about it. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye!